Hello and welcome to another lecture on writing clean and effective Python code. In this lecture, we will learn where to use list comprehension instead of using some complex things like using map and filter. So let's say you have a problem statement in Python wherein you have to multiply each number in the list by 2. So let's first go ahead and create a list. So let's type in a equals. So let's say a is the name of your list. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So you actually need to go ahead and give spaces over here as well, or else we will be violating the general rule of not giving spaces. So make sure that you have proper spaces in between these elements, and it's actually quite a good practice to always write clean Python code, because the more you write clean code, the more you remember what clean code actually is. Okay, so once you have this list with you and your problem statement is to multiply each number in the list by 2. So one way of doing that is by using list comprehension, and other way is by using map and filter. So you might recall that by using map in order to calculate result, what you could do is that you could type in result, which is going to be a resultant list, and then you could type map, and after that you could specify a lambda function. So you type lambda, and as in this case we have to work with a, we will specify an equation for x. So x colon x multiplied by 2, and that's actually going to give us the result for the list a. So always make sure that you also have spaces over here. Okay, so once you do that, I guess we don't need a space over here, so it says white space before this. Okay, so once you have this lambda with you, this is actually going to store your result in the result variable, and when you print out the result, so if you save the code and let's say you run the code as well, so let's see what result we get. So when you actually go ahead and run this code, we actually got this kind of result, and the reason for that is we do have to typecast this result to list even before we pass it as an output. So if you do that and if you save the code and run this thing, you will actually get the result as a list wherein each of your element is multiplied by 2. So this is one way of doing so, that is by using a map and lambdas, but this is one of the most inefficient ways when you actually want to perform a relatively simple operation. So our aim in this case was to go through the list and multiply each number for 2, and we have used a lambda function and map for this. And the thing with lambda and maps is that it's only efficient if we use maps and lambdas while we perform some complex operations. But in case of simply handling some kind of list or anything like that, this is actually not a correct way to do so. Instead, what you could simply do is that you could use list comprehension instead of this particular map. So what you could have done here is that you could have replaced this thing with result equals, and you could simply have used list comprehension by typing let's say x multiplied by 2 for x in a. So once you do that, this code is much simpler, and this list comprehension actually requires a lot of less resources and a less amount of code, and it actually makes your job much more simpler, as well as it makes the code efficient. So if you save this code and if you actually go ahead and run this, as you could see, now you get the same result, but this time you have used list comprehension as opposed to maps and lambdas. So this is one of the things which you need to keep in mind, that always use list comprehension whenever possible, but when you're working with complex data, you could opt for map and lambdas. Now, one of the most interesting things, or a thing which you might not know about Python, is that you could always use an else statement in for loop. So usually we use the else statement in combination with the if statement, but in Python we could use else statement with for loop as well. So let's take a simple example. So I'm going to type in for x in range, let's say 5, and what you could do here is that you could simply print out the value of x, and here, just like we do for the if statement, you could specify the else block over here, and let's say you print something out like, let's say this is the else block. So now if you go ahead, save the code, and if you run this code, as you could see, you get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 as the part of this loop, and finally, no matter what, the else block is going to get executed. So this type of functionality is provided in Python because it's required in some of the cases, and we have not yet encountered any case wherein you actually need to use an else block along with the for loop. So in case of an if statement, what happens is that if the condition here turns out to be true, then the else block is never executed. But when the condition turns out to be false, the else block is executed. But this is not the case while using the else block with the for loop. So when you write a for loop, no matter what is there in the for loop, the else block always gets executed. So one way to stop this is by including a break statement over here. So what you could do, in order to stop execution of the else block, you could use if statement by typing, let's say if x is equal to, let's say you want to stop at 4. So you simply need to type in break over here. So now if you actually go ahead and if you execute this code, as you could see, now as soon as x encounters the value equal 4, the code actually breaks and now the else block is not executed. So this is how you could actually use the else block with the for loop, and don't get confused if you ever encounter such code. This simply means that the for loop is going to get executed, and if the for loop is not going to have a break statement, the else block is going to be executed in any case. So that's it for this lecture, and hopefully you guys were able to learn a few things about writing clean and efficient code in Python. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.